Good morning, everybody. Lee Brower here, and welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. I am grateful to be here, and I am glad to be here. Where am I? Well, maybe you can't tell, but I'm in a padded cell. Not really. I'm actually in the sky room of Delta Airlines, connecting into Minneapolis, where we'll be this week, first part of the week anyway, for a workshop there with Empowered Wealth. Looking forward to it. You know, there's a lot going on in the world. As I look at the things that are going on in the world, what do we have that really teaches us, and what can we really do about it? I'm reminded of a story that I'm sure most of you have heard, but it's about an old Cherokee man, that he was talking to his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves that is inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other wolf is good. He's all about joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." So the grandson thought about it for a minute, and he asked his grandpa, "Which wolf wins?" And the old Cherokee grandfather simply replied, "The one you feed." You know, I think as life goes on, as you get a little bit older and you start to look backwards, I think you can really recognize the truths that are found in this simple story. I think it has a lot to do with maturing. Maturing is an interesting word to me when they talk about for mature audiences only. Really? Really? In other words, the content of this, you have to be mature in order to understand some of the silliness that's happening. I think it was, as we talk about maturity in general, I'm not quite sure who has the right or responsibility to declare someone an adult. But I'm quite certain that often the least qualified to make this epic declaration would be the individual himself. If a person is mature, he or she will not need to announce it. Probably the best measurement of maturity is personal conduct. In fact, it's probably the only true measurement. I don't think it's too far off the mark to say adult conduct is a process. We're all continuing to learn. But your conduct is generally developed through self-discipline, resilience, and a continuing effort. Aren't we all continuing to mature? I think Neal A. Maxwell, an American scholar, educator, and religious leader some 15, 20 years ago, said the following, which I really appreciate given the world that we live in today. He said, "The world today is so full of information which tries to not only inform, but sometimes to misinform us. Just as the capacity to defer gratification is a sign of real maturity, likewise, the willingness to wait for a deferred explanation is a sign of real faith and trust spread over time." Think about that. The willingness to wait for a deferred explanation, not just jumping to a conclusion, is an element of faith. We live in a time where everything can be resolved in a 30 or a 60-minute TV show, or maybe a 2.5-hour Avengers will have a whole world problem solved. But don't most things you face take a while to work themselves out? They just don't work themselves out that quickly. As I think about maturity, Susan Peters once said, "Children have a much better chance of growing up if their parents have done so first." So, you know, the impact of the decisions we make in our lives are so important. Maturity is something that I think happens to us as we grow and as we develop. You look at maturity in and of itself and the elements of it: humility, gratitude, learning, the willingness to continue to learn from others, to be cautious, to take our time, to be able to think before we react, to respond. These are all elements of maturity. I hope you can remember this story about this great Cherokee father. I think it was great wisdom for all of us. Have a great week. I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye.